Hey everybody, this is Mark from Harris Outdoors, and I'm back today to do another video with the Community Outdoors. This is Season 2, Episode 7. This season has been on prolonged survival, and my video today is going to be showing some of you how to collect and process a good tinder bundle and collect some of the materials you need on getting a fire and some of the steps you take to get a fire in a survival situation. So stay with me. Alright guys, I want to get into tinder bundles for a minute. Tinder bundles are essential in a survival situation. To start a good fire, you need a good tinder bundle. And here in the eastern woodlands, I rely on the tulip poplar. Tulip poplar is abundance out here. It grows extremely fast. It's an extremely tall tree, and it's easy to identify. What I look for when I'm looking for a tulip poplar is, as you can see right here, this bone colored tree once the bark's off of it. Typically, if you're looking through a green woodland and you see this, you're looking at tulip poplar. So that's just a good way to identify it. Also, another way to identify tulip poplar is its leaf. And this is a tulip poplar leaf. This is what it looks like. Another way to identify the tulip poplar is, as you can see, it has this bark that peels off in strands, and it comes off fairly easy. This is what I actually make the tinder out of. When I process it up, I get a nice fluffy tinder ball out of it, and I'll show you that in a minute. Alright, so to process up this tulip poplar, And I don't have much here. This is just for demonstration purposes, but just take it and pull off strands of the bark. Like I said, it comes off fairly easy. Okay, so what you want out of this bark is actually the inner bark. All the brown stuff on the outside you want to try to get off. So what I do is take about a 12-inch section, fold them up into a 12-inch section, grab it on both sides and just kind of take and roll it. And what that does is release that outer bark from the inner bark, and it'll fall off for the most part. And you might have to go back in through and pick some of it out, but just keep working it like so, and you're going to finally end up with a nice fluffy tinder bundle in the end. Just ragging it up. Now when I do this, I do typically try to do it over a stump. And what happens is, as you do it, if I can get this right, as you do it, all this dust will fall onto the stump, and I keep that. And that's a good flash tinder. I like to hold on to this, make a nice little pile, and put that in the middle of my tinder bundle, and that helps that cherry get started in there. That little ember helps it create a bigger ember when you have stuff like this dust. So that's just another tip that may help you in a long-term survival situation, or prolonged. Now as you do it, you're going to notice you're going to have these little bits and pieces of bark, and I just kind of go through and pick them off. Most of them will come off as you're processing it and tearing it up, but if they don't, if some of them are left, just go through, because you don't want those in there. That's just going to make that fire that much harder to catch. You want that soft, paper-like inner bark, not that tough, dark outer bark. So take your time with this. This is a very important process to get right, because this will make or break you. If you don't have this part right, if you haven't taken the time you need, there's a possibility of failure. And in a survival situation, what you don't want is a possibility of failure. You have a lot of times one chance at this, and if you take that chance and blow it, well, you know where that leaves you. And once you have all this stuff processed up the way you like it, you know you've done a good job. You can just kind of take and put your thumbs down in the middle and just kind of take and roll it around and make a bird's nest out of it, or what resembles a bird's nest. Trying to fill in those little gaps that are all in it. Just keep taking and rolling it around, keeping your thumbs in the middle. And that's going to create a little place for you to lay your ember. Now, like I said, all of this stuff that you've acquired under where you've been processing this. Take all this stuff and just kind of roll it up into a little ball. And I feel this is an important part. This has always helped me, especially doing friction fire. You know, if you're struggling to get an ember, but you have a small one, typically if you roll this stuff up and place it down into the middle of that bird's nest and drop your ember in there on top of it and let her sit. You know, don't get crazy with it trying to blow it into flames right away. Let it sit and let it create a little ember and all that fine stuff, and it'll grow. Then you can take and blow this thing into flames slowly. So this is making a tinder bundle out of tulip poplar bark. And I hope this helps some people maybe in the eastern woodlands try to locate and process up a good tinder bundle. Alright guys, another thing I'd like to add is, now I know this isn't bushcraft, this is a prolonged survival video, but I feel a lot of times that there should be steps taken, whether you know you're going to be gone for a long time or you are just planning on doing a day hike. I feel like there should be steps taken before you leave to make sure you're going to be prepared in case of a situation. So there's things you should carry, and I know I've done the 5 and 10 C's to survival video. I'm sure most of you have watched that, so you know that I carry a pretty substantial fire kit with me, and I mean everything's in it from lighters to matches to, you know, tinder bundles to you name it, it's in there. I'm not going to go without fire, as some of you said, but just one more thing. If you can locate yourself some fat wood somewhere and get a good piece, take and carve yourself a little keychain. And this is something that I've done that just hooks onto my sheath of my knife and it stays on my belt all the time. This is another thing that's going to help you in a wet weather situation. It's not much to carry. It goes on your belt right there with your knife, or connected to your fire steel. You know, this is not a whole lot of kit to carry that is going to help you substantially in starting a fire in wet weather conditions. This to me are these 3 things right here are essential in a survival situation, with the exception of a tinder bundle. And I feel like if you have these 2 things, you can make anything happen. If you've got these things, you've helped yourself tremendously. And if you know how to locate and process a tinder bundle, you've got it made. So just another little tidbit on helping to start fires in a survival situation. Alright guys, something I'd like to add in real quick as far as long-term survival or prolonged survival is a little bit of a wild edible. This is greenbrier. This grows everywhere in the eastern woodlands around me, and this is a very edible plant, especially in the springtime when it gets its new shoots. All of this that you see up here is all edible. If you can grab the thorn, and the thorn is rubbery and doesn't stick you, it's edible. So what you do, you just take the top, pinch that little piece of the top off right there, and you can eat all that. Okay, this is one of the ways you can identify the greenbrier, is you have these leaves with 3 veins run from the base of the leaf all the way up to the tip. Another way to identify it, of course, is the stickers all over it. I don't know if you can see the stickers. Also, another way to identify it is it has these little curly Q type reaching out branches that help it hook on to other things to climb trees and stuff like that. See if I can find a little piece and I'll show you that. Alright, so these are some of the curly Qs I'm talking about, and it's kind of hard to get these on film because they're actually in the bush. But they reach all over the plant and grab other branches and things, and they just wrap around it like that and climb. But in the springtime, all these little curly Qs, when they're reaching out trying to find all these other plants, they are they're actually green as well and very edible, very tasty, almost like asparagus. You can eat them raw. You can cook them up like you do asparagus, and that goes for the whole top of the new growth of the plant. You can eat the leaves, the new growth coming off the top, and these little vines that pop off of it. So that's just a little extra I wanted to throw in there in case you're out there hungry and looking for something to eat. Alright guys, so let's talk about this for a second. Now, I've done videos on the 5 and 10 C's to survival, and I feel like they're very important if you're going to be stepping out of the house for a day hike, whether you're going hunting, camping, fishing, whatever the case may be. I feel like that if you're going to be stepping out into the woods, you need to have a little preparedness to yourself, to have these things in your pack to make sure if you get in a situation that you're going to be able to provide yourself with a way to keep warm, a way to procure water, a way to cook food. So I think everybody knows what the 5 and 10 C's to survival are at this point. One of the 5 C's is a combustion device. Now I'm going to go into a little bit on how to get fire in a survival situation based on the fact that you have a combustion device. I'm going to do that first, and different ways you can implement using that combustion device in a wet weather situation. Past that, I'm also going to go into a little bit on how to get a friction fire. Say you lost your ferro rod in the woods, or your lighter got wet and it doesn't work, or whatever the case may be. I'm going to step into it a little bit on how to get a fire with friction. So stay with me and I'm going to get to that. Alright guys, so I'm going to show you a way to get fire in wet weather situations if you have a combustion device. So I collected some fat wood out of that tree earlier. I'm going to take and I'm just going to cut a sliver off of it. Pretty good little chunk. Alright, so I got myself a nice little slither. I'm going to set that to the side. Now I'm going to take the 90-degree edge of my spine. I'm just going to process up some of this fat wood into a pile. Now it's been raining here off and on for the last week really, but it rained torrential downpour last night, so everything here is pretty wet. So this might take a second, but it'll work. So you want to scrape up enough of this fat wood to light a fire with. Scrape up as much as what you think you need, and then double it. Now take the sliver, and if you have a nice stump or log laying there and you can see the water coming out of this log as I'm stabbing it, and stick that piece of fat wood standing up in that log, and just kind of pile all of that shaving around it. Now I'm going to take a little bit of this bird's nest that you see me process out of the tulip poplar, and I'm going to take a little bit of this pine sap or pine pitch that you've seen me get out of the side of this tree. I'm going to place that right in the middle, because pine pitch and pine sap is a fire extender, and in wet weather situations you need something that's going to last a little bit longer than normal. So you put that inside of your tinder bundle, and that's going to help that burn for a little longer to get those wet twigs and sticks to light. So I'm going to set that aside. Okay, so the fat wood goes up. Now what that's going to do, hopefully, is that's going to start that twig that's standing up, that sliver of fat wood. It's going to catch it on fire, and it's going to give you much more flame to work with in a wet weather situation. So now the twig's on fire, or the sliver's on fire. Now if this tinder bundle was soaking wet, you could hold this above it, and it's going to give you a lot longer burn time to get your tinder bundle lit to get into your fire. And because that sap is inside of it, it's going to burn for a little longer than it normally would. Okay guys, so let's talk about friction fire for a minute. In my opinion, friction fire is a last resort. And that's only because friction fire is hard to do. There's people out there who have the skill sets to be able to whip a fire up like that with friction. And I get it, and I'm not so much talking to you guys. I'm talking to more of the beginner type people. People like me. You know, I can get fire by friction pretty easily in the right conditions. I wouldn't want to be caught with my pants down out in the woods when I'm thirsting to death, when it's going to be extremely cold that night. I don't want to be caught with my pants down trying to depend on fire by friction just because there's a chance I might not get it, and I don't want to put myself in that situation. So again, that's where that 5Cs comes in and carrying combustion device. And I think it's important, not only do you carry a combustion device, but I think it's important to carry multiple combustion devices, at least a couple on your persons, a couple in your pack. That way if you lose your pack, you have something on you. You know, very important. Fire by friction takes a lot of calories. You have to know your surroundings very well to gather the kit you need to get fire by friction, and you have to have acclimate weather, and all of these things play a huge role in survival. So that being said, I know there are times where it comes in where you have to do it, and that's why I'm going to show you this. There are several different ways of getting fire by friction. In my opinion, a bow drill is the #1 way to get fire by friction because it's a mechanical advantage. And that means a lot. When you're trying to hand drill something down, you're ruining your hands, you're expending a ton of calories, and you still don't know if you're going to get a fire. There's a ton of ways out there, but I'm going to go into bow drill, and I'm going to show you guys that, so stay with me. All right, so let's talk about bow drill for a second. Now, bow drill also involves one of the 5 C's. Actually, bow drill involves 2 of the 5 C's. One of the 5 C's is cordage, and you're gonna have to have cordage for your bow drill. And whether that be a hank of paracord that you have in your pack, or a roll of bank line that you keep in there, or one of your bootlaces, whatever, you're gonna have to have some sort of cordage for your bow drill. So when I'm doing bow drill, I try to find the bow part, and I want it to be from palm to pit. Try to find something about like that, and I try to find something that's got a little bit of a bow in it, and that's going to allow your spindle to run up and down easily on your paracord or whatever you have on here. So there's your bow. Alright guys, so next you're going to need a hearth board, and a hearth board is basically what you drill into with your spindle to make the dust that creates the ember for your fire. For this, you're going to need a soft wood, and I showed you earlier how to identify the tulip poplar tree. Well, the tulip poplar tree not only works good for a tinder bundle, but it is also a softwood and can be used for a hearth board. So while you're locating your tulip poplar tree for your tinder bundle, you can also be locating a tulip poplar tree for your hearth board. If you see this bone color standing in the woods, well, you know you have a dead standing tulip poplar, and that's going to be good for a hearth board and for a bow drill kit. What I typically do is cut a section out about 6 inches long, about 3 inches across. I'll baton down on both sides to get a slender piece, probably about 1 inch thick, using a knife that come out of my 5 C's, and that's my hearth board. I'll go a little further into this in a minute. Alright, so next you'll need to make yourself a spindle, and a spindle can also be made out of the tulip poplar. Needs to be a softwood. You can make these things however long you want them, whatever's comfortable to you. This is mine. I've had this one for a while. It's pretty short. This is just what I like to use. A lot of people like them a little bit longer. A lot of people put a little divot in them for the rope to wrap around. One side you want to be kind of blunt, like an eraser head on a pencil, and then the other side you want to be like sort of like the tip of the pencil, not sharp, kind of blunt, but more like the tip of the pencil. This one you can see has shoulders on it, and I'll show you why here in just a second. But the main thing is softwood, and like I said, tulip poplar works for this as well. Alright guys, so the last thing you need for your bow drill kit is a bearing block. And a bearing block basically sits on top of your spindle and allows your spindle to turn on your hearth board. So you can make a bearing block out of a lot of different things. It can be a stone that you found that has a natural divot in it that will allow this thing to ride freely. It can be a hard piece of wood that you create a divot in to allow it to ride freely. Or you can do like I've done, and I've taken a piece of tulip poplar that I had left over and I've actually embedded a skateboard wheel bearing in it. And that actually allows this thing to turn freely with no friction. A lot of times people have problems getting a friction fire because their spindle wants to bind in their bearing block. Now, I understand not everybody's going to have this in a survival situation. So when you're making your bearing block, you want to put a divot in it that's going to allow your spindle to ride on the tip. If you're trying to get fire and you hear that squeaking as you're pulling that bow back and forth, well, a lot of times that squeaking is because the bearing block itself is riding on the edges on the side, and it's causing too much friction and it's not allowing it to turn properly. So a lot of times you'll have to take and sharpen this thing back up to a little bit more of a point to allow it to ride better. But just a hard piece of wood's all you need. Doesn't have to be a wheel bearing. This is just what I use because it makes my life a little easier. Alright guys, something I like to do with my bow is I like to take on the opposite side from where my spindle is going to ride, and I like to cut a notch on the rear right by my hand, and a notch on the top. And this allows whatever my cordage is to sit in there and not slip. So I tie one side to the top, and then I bring the other side down and tie around the bottom to allow my spindle to ride. Okay, so another thing I like to do is I like to take a little bit of sap that you see me collect off this pine tree back here. And I like to take this sap and get it in my fingers and kind of get my fingers nice and sticky. Just kind of heat it up with your fingers and it'll kind of turn back into a liquid a little bit and gets nice and sticky on there. Once I have my fingers nice and sticky, I like to take the cordage on my bow drill and run my fingers up and down it. And what that does is it adds a little bit of tar to that cordage, whether it be your shoestring or whether it be paracord. If you're using bank line's already tarred, so you don't have to do this, but this helps grip the spindle and help keep it from slipping when it's running up and down on your bow drill, or on your bow, I mean. So that's just a little tip. It's something I do. I found it helps me a lot. Alright guys, so let's get started. Let's take our knife and go to one end or the other of your bearing block. Go back about 1/2 inch from the edge. Say about 1/2 inch from the edge, and create a divot in your bearing block. And you want this to be kind of a wide divot, because this is where you're going to start your spindle. You just want to give it enough to where when you put your spindle on there and you start turning it, it doesn't slip out. It's just a little starter knot, or starter divot. Okay, doesn't have to be anything fancy. Just get you a little spot started in there. Now at this point you want to get your tender bundle ready and just keep turning it into a bird's nest. You want to get it ready and have it at arm's reach from where you're doing your fire start. So I'm just going to set it right over here on this rock, off the ground, out of the dampness. Alright guys, so the next thing we want to do is burn in our hearth board. So we're going to set our spindle down in our divot we created. Get our bearing block on top and start spinning slowly. You'll start to see smoke right now, but that doesn't mean you're going to have fire yet. We're just trying to get it burned in. Once you have a nice little start of some dust on the top, stop what you're doing, pull it away. Okay, so now that we have our spot burnt into our hearth board, we want to take and do our notch on the front going into our divot. And what this is going to do is, as you turn, all the dust that collects around it will fall into that notch onto a piece of wood we set down to collect the ember. So without this notch, you're not going to get an ember, nothing that you can pick up and put into a tinder bundle. So with this, we have our divot, and we just want to take at an angle with our multi-tool or whatever type of little saw you have, or you can do this with your knife. It just takes a little bit longer time, and just cut into it at an angle. And you want it to meet the divot. And And then come at the other direction and do the same thing. And just pop that divot out. Take your knife and just kind of clean it up. Take out any of that loose stuff that's hanging around, that little bit of hairy stuff that's hanging around. And just kind of clean that stuff out of there. So you'll end up with something like this. Now that we have this, we're ready to try to get an ember. Alright, now that we're ready to try to get an ember, we need something to catch the dust to make the ember. So this is just the other side of this piece of wood, and it's really thin. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take and stick it underneath that notch I created. And as that dust falls out, it'll collect on top of that piece of wood and create that ember we need. Alright guys, so once again, just like before, we're going to take our spindle, sit it down into our divot, put our bearing block on the top, and start to turn slowly. And what you want to do is you want to build up that dust before you try to turn real fast. So just give it time and watch your notch fill up with dust. Once you get that notch full of dust, then start to turn pretty fast, just like this. Now you don't have to be in a hurry at this point. Just let that ember build. If it's smoking by itself, you have an ember. So just let that thing build. Get your hearthboard out of the way. Bring your tinder bundle to you and set it down beside your ember. And just let that thing build. No need to rush now. You've got it at this point. Now, once you've got a good ember built, take your tinder bundle and just dump it in. Easy. You got your ember in here. Now all you got to do is blow this thing into flame. If I can get in a situation where you can see me. Here we go. Just like that, guys. Now, like I was saying, this takes some practice. This isn't something you're going to go out in the woods and get the first time. You know, this is a skill I've worked on for quite a few years. And if you can gather the right materials, if you're in the eastern woodland, tulip poplar is your friend. and you can do a lot with this tree, especially with fire making, making utensils for camp. You know, it's just a soft wood. It's easy to carve. You can do a ton with it. So this went all the way from finding it, collecting the materials you need off of it to make a good tinder bundle, identifying the leaves, the bark, the inner bark, the tree itself, and being able to use it to create your tinder bundle, make your bow drill kit, and get fire. So something to be said for the tulip poplar tree. Yeah, so there's fire, man. That's all I can say for now. Alright guys, so one more thing I'd like to talk about, and this is if you have a ferro rod and a striker, and you're thinking about, you know you're going to be out there for a couple days, and you don't want to go through the hassle that you went through last night tonight for a fire. Well, some of these charred wood pieces that are left over from the fire the night before, take them with you. You know, this is next fire mentality, and you can take these things with you. And I can't do it with this one because this has been out here for a while and it's been raining and this thing's soaking wet. But if you can gather this up from the night before, keep it from getting wet, you can actually strike your ferro rod into it like so, and it will catch an ember, and you can use that to start your next fire. So just another little tidbit for you to help with that next fire. This is all next fire mentality. So if you have something like a little tin box or something that you would keep char cloth in, maybe you ran out of char cloth, whatever. If you ran out of char cloth making your first fire, just either make more char cloth out of another bandana or collect some of this charred wood from the last night's fire, stick that in there, and it'll be helpful getting an ember on the next night. Alright everyone, I think that's pretty much going to wrap it up for season 2. I'd like to thank each and every one of y'all for coming along with us on the journey of season 2 with the Community Outdoors once again. And I'd like to say that I hope that every one of you guys gain something from at least one of the videos that we've put out there in this season and are able to take it with you on your adventure, whether it be hunting, fishing, camping, canoeing down a river, bushcrafting, or just on a hiking trail. We all would like to say thanks, so we appreciate you. That being said, keep an eye out for season 3. We don't have any definite dates or plans nailed down yet. Just keep with us on our channels and we'll let you know just as soon as something pops up. And from me here at Harris Outdoors, I appreciate you, and stay tuned for more videos. There you have it.